It's Tuesday, February the 25th, and this is Business Morning on Channels Television. I am Bisi Akdebayo. On Monday, the National Bureau of Statistics released the GDP data for the fourth quarter of 2019, as well as the full year. And as expected, there have been a series of reactions to the GDP data. While some commend the resilience of the economy for posting the strongest quarterly growth post-2016 recession, others believe that the economy may be set for a slower pace of growth momentum in 2020, given the outlook on global oil prices. But let's get the first word from the Nigerian Statistician General himself and the DG of the National Bureau of Statistics, Dr. Yemi Kale. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Good morning, Dr. Kale. Now, let's have your reaction to the current GDP data that you and your team released yesterday. Are you satisfied with the current pace of Nigeria's GDP growth?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm satisfied with the current pace. I think the economy has to grow a bit faster for it to have more of an impact on the lives of the citizens. But I think the positive from the result is that it's very strong. It's consistent, steady growth. The direction of that growth is positive. It's been every quarter growth has been stronger than the corresponding quarter. And I think that speaks to direction, is moving in the right direction. And I think all that needs to happen is to keep faith with policy. And but no, I think the economy needs to grow a bit faster. But like I said, I think the direction is very positive.
All right, some have criticized your methodology for gathering data for the GDP. What's your scientific method of computing the GDP data?
Nigerian GDP data is calculated the same way it's done everywhere in the world. We use the system, the United Nations system of national accounts is what every country in the world uses to compute GDP. Is exactly what we use to compute GDP as well as the international standards for industrial classification. It's extremely esoteric. It's a process that is done everywhere in the world. Our systems are also verified, validated by the IMF and the World Bank, who check that we are following the guidelines. So I'm not really sure the basis of any criticism, although I've not heard any, but I'm actually not sure what the basis of any criticism might be, because we follow international standards in every way we compute our data.
About how easy or difficult is it to put this data together?
Once you know the methodology, all that is left is to collect the data. The data is there's the formal sector and the informal sector. The formal sector is more or less a census. So we are getting data from the Inland Revenue Services returns by companies operating in Nigeria. So that's actually what the GDP data is actually what companies themselves are reporting to the Inland Revenue Services. And for the informal sector, we do household surveys. That's because informal sector businesses are usually household owned businesses, and we go and get those. So that's how we get informal sector data for the GDP. And of course, the formal sector data comes from Inland Revenue Services. In situations where the regulators are strong, for example, the data that we use for the financial sector comes from the central bank. We get the central bank to get the banks to get all the data we need to compute GDP in line with the way GDP is supposed to be computed using the financial sector. Same thing we do with the telecom sector. So where there are strong regulators, we use them to get the data on our behalf. Otherwise, we use SEC records, we use FIS records to get data for the formal sector. And for the informal sector, we're using household surveys to go to households to get information about their businesses. Agric data, we are going to farmlands to measure the size of output. That's how the data is collected across the different sectors.
Okay, so you've told us how the data is collected across the sectors. But yesterday, one of our guests on the show said that the NBS does not have the capacity to generate this data. Now, what exactly is the capacity of the NBS in generating the data?
Well, I would invite whoever that guest is to NBS to come and have a look for himself. What we do when we get these kinds of comments is that we ask whoever it is to come to the NBS and to follow us when we are gathering this data so they can see how it is done. We've done this before. And the few people that have accepted this invitation have spoken very positively about our processes. So whoever this guest is, will challenge him to come to NBS and oversee the process of how the data is collected so he can see for himself. We collect data today using computer-assisted personal interview devices. They are the size of an iPad. They are GPS-enabled. as the field work is being collected, I can actually see data right on my desktop as the work is being collected. So we can very quickly interrogate the data that is coming. So the enumerator goes to the field, collects the data. Once he gets each particular record, and clicks enter on the device, the data goes straight into our database, immediately into our database at the headquarters. So allows our data processors to actually go to the data and work on it. So I'm not sure where this guest gets his own information from, that NBS does not have the capacity. We have offices in all the states of the Federation. We have staff in all the states of the Federation. And our processes for data collection have been highly automated. So again, I disagree with his comment, and I will invite him over to the NBS to come and oversee how data is collected. We're more than happy for him to come and go with us as data is collected, to observe himself how data is collected. We have done this. We have invited other people, and they have spoken very positively about our processes.
I'm sure he's watching and will take you up on that offer. Now, economists measure GDP using expenditure, income, and output approaches. However, the NBS focuses mainly on the output approach, and that the lag in the release of the same data using other approaches is usually too long. Why can't the Bureau release these three approaches simultaneously?
Well, I explained to you the process for getting data using the output approach, because you are getting records from sectors, from businesses operating in sectors. It's a lot easier to get that information because they are mandated to release records on a quarterly basis, which ties in very nicely with the output approach. That's why we publish that. Now, the expenditure approach is slower, and that's because expenditure is focusing on household consumption expenditure plus government expenditure, capital formation, government and public investment, and net trade. Now, net trade is not a problem. Private sector investment is not a problem. Household consumption expenditure is not a problem. But the problem we have is federal government expenditure and investment. Now, not federal government, federal and state government expenditure and investment. Now, the challenge we have is with getting the data on time from the states. Not only are we getting data from the state, the data has to be validated. So there's a delay, usually lagged, ensuring that all 36 states and the FCT have supplied their necessary data on government investment, state government investment expenditure. That's where the delay is. And since we're not just making up figures, we have to wait until the states have submitted their data on investment and expenditure, and we still have to go and verify and validate that information before we can complete the expenditure approach. The output approach, on the other hand, is already being supplied, like I said, on a quarterly basis by businesses operating in Nigeria. So that makes it a lot easier and faster. And that's basically the reason why there's a delay between the output and the expenditure and income approaches.
Well, is there anything that can be done to probably speed up the process?
Well, we operate a federation. We have no ability to compel or force state governments to fast-track their data supply. Most of the time, they don't even have the data on time because of their internal processes. We are in constant communication with the Governors Forum. We're trying our best to speak to the states themselves to try and get the data faster. But whether we like it or not, it's going to be difficult to get all 36 states and the FCT to send their data all at the same time. Most of the time, we get maybe half of the states or 3/4 of the state, but we have to wait for every single state to be ready because we don't want to make up numbers and put numbers in there. So we have to wait. So it's a case of understanding that this is a federation and states don't exist just to supply data to NBS. It's a case of speaking to them on a regular basis, trying to encourage them to send the data faster, which is what we are doing. But again, it's largely out of the control of the NBS.
Now, some years back, the NBS would release preliminary growth forecasts for the economy, but this seems to be missing now. When should we expect the NBS to resume preliminary forecasts of some of the macroeconomic data the agency releases?
Well, the mandate on the job description of the Statistics Office is not necessarily to be producing forecasts. We produce actuals. We still produce forecasts, but that's more of a is not published, and we do that for the benefit of our government. But we're not supposed to be publishing forecasts. I think it takes away from the actual numbers we're meant to be publishing. We do have models that predict different indicators, and we make that available to different government departments that need that information. If, for example, during the budgeting process, some of the numbers you see there as estimates for the budgeting process actually come from our models from NBS. So we do make such forecasts, but we don't make it an officially published report any longer, because it takes away from what we are meant to be doing in the statistics office. We're not really meant to be coming out with forecasts. We are meant to come up with actual numbers, and we want to focus our energies on that.
All right. Now, recently, the IMF downgraded Nigeria's GDP growth forecast for 2020 to 2.0%. Do you agree with this downgrade? And what are your own forecasts for the economy? I know you just talked about having to deal with real numbers, but what are your forecasts for the economy in 2020, if you'd say?
Well, our forecast for the economy, you can see that in the 2020 budget. The forecast in the 2020 budget came from NBS, so that basically answers that question. So it clearly means that we don't agree with the IMF forecast. But you have to understand that the IMF downgraded their own initial forecast based on current realities. The forecast that was in the budget was done much earlier. It might be revised later on, depending on what we see happen in the economy. So it's difficult to say. As new data comes out, for example, the Q4 data actually surprised me, because I expected it to be slightly weaker in Q4, but the economy actually did better than I thought it was going to do in Q4, better than our forecast anyway. So forecasts are just exactly what they are. They are based on what you see currently happening, but based on a simple tweak in government policy or an introduction of a new policy can make your forecast completely unreliable. Another reason why we feel that we should not rely on forecasts, and this is why IMF and other agencies routinely adjust their forecast. Again, it's based on new available information. So I can't tell you whether or not the IMF forecast will be realistic or not, because I cannot predict what's going to happen in the next 12 months. It depends on a lot of things, including what businesses choose to do. It depends on household consumption expenditure patterns. It depends on what happens with net trade, exports and imports that are completely out of the control of Nigeria and even Nigerian government to an extent. So it's difficult to say which forecast will be correct and which forecast will not be. But looking at the trend so far in our economic growth, it has improved every quarter, every year since 2016. And if that pattern continues, and I don't have any reason for now to believe it will not, to suggest that the growth in 2020 should be stronger than the growth in 2019, which would suggest that the IMF forecast might be understating our potential performance. In any case, part of the agencies that are visited by the IMF to have discussions with before they come up with this forecast are the NBS. They talk to us, so they already have our views, and I guess our views were also taken into consideration before they came up with their forecast, like many other agencies they visited.
Dr. Kale, talk us through the politics of your job. Are there instances of political interference with some of the data that you publish?
There is no instance of political interference in our job. We do our we do our work without any interference, and that has always been the case. There's nobody interfering. Not even my supervising ministers even get to see the numbers before they maybe hear about the numbers an hour or so before they are published, but nobody interferes in the publication of any of our data. And if anybody has been observing NBS for the last 8 or so years, we realize that data published from this agency has been both positive to government and negative to government. We don't interfere. Whatever data comes out, and we publish it as it is. And there's nobody that calls me to ask me to tamper with any data or criticize me anyway directly about anything we are doing in our office. We are completely independent as far as the processes of getting data and publishing data is concerned.
Some have argued that your agency is being underfunded, and so that is affecting the release of some data. For instance, the unemployment statistics, which was last released in the third quarter of 2018. Is your agency truly underfunded? And if yes, what are you doing to mitigate these challenges?
I guess the NBS is definitely not funded as adequately as we want to. That has always been the case. Actually has improved in the last few years, but it's still significantly underfunded. Not only is it significantly underfunded, we often don't get the money on time. We have to wait for the budget to be passed and different things like that. So yes, we've had challenges with funding like many other agencies in the country. What are we doing to improve the funding situations, apart from discussing the challenges with our bosses and letting them know how it's affecting our operations, and they are trying also to see what they can do to get us the funding on time. We don't want to start charging for data because data is meant to be free. So what we do is we adopt as many cost-saving measures as we can to ensure we save as much money as possible so we can produce as much data as possible. Last year, we got only about 40% of our data production budget, for example. So it's clearly not going to be possible to produce 100% of what we want to produce if you are going to get in 40%. So again, it is advocacy trying to get us to get a better budget, defending our need for money more aggressively, and then finding ways to produce data even cheaper so we can produce more data. And that's why we have moved from paper-based data collection measures to more electronic means of collecting data, again, just to save costs. That's why we revamped our website. Rather than producing hard copies of our reports with 200, 300 pages, we rather use the money that we used to publish hard copies to produce even more data and put the data on the website, because that even gets to a wider audience. So different ways of cost saving and advocacy to get better funding for organizations, both from our government and from development agencies.
Now, let's talk about the NBS plans to begin the national census of commercial and industrial businesses to monitor and evaluate the impact of government economic blueprints, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. What can you tell us about this?
Well, the National Census of Industries and Businesses is meant to be done as recommended by the United Nations Statistics Commission, which we are a member of, to be done every 10 years. Now, we have not done this for over 3 decades. What the NCCIB is supposed to do is basically to, like a population census, to go to every street in every local government and record every business operating on every street in every local government, whether formal or informal. It gives a better picture of activities, both formal and informal, operating in Nigeria. And it gives a huge amount of information for governments to be able to plan. If you know where businesses are operating, you understand their staff strength, you understand their constraints, you understand where what sectors that they're operating. It helps government to develop policies and programs to target the problem more effectively. So that's the whole objective of the NCCIB. It's a routine business census that is meant to be done a bit more frequently. But again, because of funding challenges, we have not been able to do it for about 3 decades. And that's basically the objective of the NCCIB. It gives a better picture of businesses operating across the country.
Statistician General and the DG of the National Bureau of Statistics, Dr. Yemi Kale, would like to thank you for speaking with us on Business Morning.